Hello, it's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, a former police officer sentenced to 10.5 years in prison over the deaths of 4 paddleboarders. Nerys Lloyd admitted 4 counts of gross negligence manslaughter after guiding a tour group over a weir in Pembrokeshire in 2021. The court heard the danger involved would have been obvious to any competent instructor. Also tonight, growing calls for prison officers to be given more protection in the UK's most dangerous jails. It comes after 3 guards were attacked by the Manchester Arena bomber's brother. We'll hear from the Prison Officers Association, as well as the UK's former head of counter-terrorism policing. Plus, a potential breakthrough in the Birmingham bin strikes. Union bosses saying a deal could be within touching distance. But the next round of talks won't take place until the end of next week. And what is it like to be a teenage girl in 2025? A new report highlights soaring cases of sexism, harassment and abuse, with victims, some of primary school age, simply learning to endure it. We meet the young women determined to bring about change. Well, that's come and much more here on the UK Tonight. Good evening. A former police officer has today been jailed for more than 10 years over the deaths of 4 paddleboarders in West Wales. Nerys Lloyd pleaded guilty to 4 counts of gross negligence manslaughter after taking a paddleboarding tour out in extremely hazardous conditions in October 2021. The judge said Miss Lloyd failed to give the group a safety briefing, didn't give one of the paddleboarders a life jacket, and dismissed a safer route down the river, calling it too boring. Sky's Amelia Harper has tonight's first report.
So is it a group just instruct?
Yeah, it's a group paddle. And they didn't go down the middle, so they went over the falls and they fell in.
This is Nerys Lloyd's first account to police, moments after her paddleboard tour went catastrophically wrong.
And I was trying to get back to them, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
Above the banks of the River Cleddau in Pembrokeshire, a helicopter circles. Called just minutes after she led a group into dangerous waters in October 2021. Nicola Wheatley, Andrea Powell, co-instructor Paul O'Dwyer and Morgan Rogers drowned after getting into difficulty. And it was the fault of 39-year-old Lloyd, sentenced to 10 years and 6 months in prison for gross negligence manslaughter.
You chose to lead the group over a weir in conditions that could not have been more treacherous, placing all of them in extreme danger. Neither you nor Paul were qualified to lead such a tour, and your whole approach to basic health and safety was abysmal.
This was where the group entered the river, a dangerous current sign visible. Despite recent flood and weather warnings, Lloyd guided the group towards a weir, a barrier for controlling river flow. The water moved over its top at 2 tons per second, trapping the paddleboarders, including Paul O'Dwyer, who tried to save them. For the families left behind, unimaginable grief.
Any sentence served by Nerys in prison will never ease the pain of losing Nicola, and our lives will never be the same again. The impact she has had on our lives is beyond words.
Lloyd failed to take consent forms and, crucially, next of kin details.
I can never forgive Nerys Lloyd for what she has taken from me. Though Nerys Lloyd's negligence, it was over 12 hours before I was informed of Morgan's death. Even then, it was another 12 hours before I formally identified her myself.
And as the victims' families come to terms with their loss, Lloyd faces years in prison. To consider how her paddleboarding trip, lasting just minutes, had lifelong consequences. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
The Prison Officers Association met the Justice Secretary today amid growing calls for guards in the UK's most dangerous jails to be given better protection. 3 officers were taken to hospital after an attack by the Manchester Arena bomber's brother at HMP Frankland earlier this month. And the union that represents them is urging ministers to listen to staff on the front line.
Myself and the national chairman have done various interviews, and I've got to say even the media are flabbergasted that we don't have those sort of protections anyway, as the police do. So it's been a long, hard slog of a campaign for us, but we're slowly getting there. And I've got to say, the meeting, we believe, when we came out, was very positive.
Here's our correspondent, Molly Malone.
Well, this is a meeting that's being framed as constructive. It came about after an alleged violent attack by the Manchester Arena bomb plotter Hashem Abedi on a number of prison officers at HMP Frankland, which is a Category A high-security jail in Durham. It happened earlier in the month, and it's believed that hot cooking oil and an improvised or homemade weapon was used against those prison officers. A number of them were hospitalised and treated for their injuries. And what happened was a series of calls to action, really, by the Prisoners Officers Association, who wanted to see suspension, permanent suspension of access for certain prisoners to use of those self-cooking facilities. They also wanted to see the use of stab vests being introduced in the high security estate, and also the use of tasers in certain situations. Now, the Justice Secretary has announced a trial on tasers being used across the high security estate. And from this meeting with ministers today, the Prison Officers Association think that we are likely to see the development, the testing of stab-proof vests being used in certain situations in certain parts of the prison estate, and also the suspension, perhaps they think, the permanent suspension of access to cooking facilities for certain prisoners. But it's all raised questions, fresh questions really, about the safety and security of prison officers in our jails. Now, earlier in the week, we heard from a man called Matthew who worked with those officers at HMP Frankland. He gave a description really about what it's like working as a prison officer. He used to work at HMP Frankland, and this is what he had to say.
The mood in Frankland since the attack is very downbeat. I've spoken to colleagues who are ex-colleagues who I'm still friends with, and they've not discussed the specifics of the incident, but they've said it'll stick with them for the rest of their lives. And I've been there when you're mopping your colleague's blood off the... When you've seen a serious assault and you're mopping your colleague's blood off the floor and you don't know if they're going to be OK, and then 10 minutes later you've got to just get back on with your day and you've got to carry on running the regime, and it's difficult and it is awful.
Now, it should be said, this is happening really right across the prison estate, right across England and Wales. There's been a 19% rise on staff assaults in the 12 months to September, so increasing violence right across the prison estate. There's also increasing violence in the youth prison estate, and as we understand it, we expect an announcement to come from the Justice Secretary, the government, tomorrow, introducing perhaps that prison officers are to be able to be used a form of pepper spray on children in the youth estate only in certain incidences of high violence in certain situations. It's a move, really, though, that will be met with some concern from prison reformers, but perhaps welcomed by prison officers as they see it, that they're continuing to face high levels of violence across the prison estate.
Earlier this week, I spoke to the former head of counter-terrorism policing, Neil Basu, and I asked him what went wrong in HMP Frankland and whether imposing even tougher conditions could prevent future attacks.
Inside Frankland, he was in the most secure prison within a secure prison. So I know there's an inquiry going on. I've heard what Charlie Taylor, the HMI for prisons, has said about that inquiry and what needs to happen to understand exactly what went wrong here. But actually, putting people in a hole in solitary confinement 24/7 for the rest of their lives is going to create a massively bigger problem for prison officers, simply because they would have nothing to lose. And let's be honest, some of these people are not curable. You know, these are sociopaths who are incredibly dangerous individuals, and my heart goes out to the prison officers who have to manage these monsters. They should be given as much safety as possible. These people should be under as much close supervision as possible, and the inquiry will determine what went wrong and what should go right in the future.
And you can watch my full interview with Neil Basu tomorrow here on the UK Tonight from 8 o'clock. A man who researched the Southport attack before stabbing a 9-year-old girl has been jailed for 30 years.
Contact! Oh, please! On the floor! On the floor! Do it now! Arms out! Do not leave your hands!
29-year-old Jordan Wilkes stabbed the girl 3 times in the stairwell of the flats where he lived with his mother in Christchurch in Dorset. A search of his home revealed a number of knives, and analysis of his phone revealed YouTube videos, news articles and podcasts that focused on murders and child killings. Now to a possible breakthrough in the bust-up over bins in Birmingham. Union officials saying that a deal to end the strikes, which have been going on for more than a month now, could be within touching distance after more talks today. Birmingham City Council say negotiations are positive, with further discussions pencilled in for the end of next week, with the conciliation service, ACAS, also now involved. Our Midlands correspondent Lisa Dowd has the latest for you.
Well, the negotiations resumed at lunchtime. They lasted for less than 45 minutes. There were two representatives from Birmingham City Council who arrived at the Unite the Union officers today. One of those was the Deputy Chief Executive of Birmingham City Council, Rishi Shourie. In spite of the length of the meeting, I caught up with him afterwards and he said it had been very productive, very positive, and they were making progress in the negotiations. This is what he had to say.
Very productive. We're meeting here next week.
Why was it so short?
We talked about our Unite's position, we reiterated ours, and we're meeting again next week to continue the negotiations. It was very positive.
Next Wednesday?
Dates are to be confirmed.
But why has it taken a week to meet again? I mean, while the rubbish on the streets continues to pile up for residents.
Well, the council's collected over 26,000 tonnes of rubbish. We've got the rubbish situation under control. We're very keen to keep the dialogue ongoing with Unite, and we're meeting again next week.
I know you say that the rubbish situation is under control, but in some parts it really isn't. And it's not fair to residents, is it?
No, absolutely, and the council wants to ensure that the impact on residents is minimised as much as possible, and we're continuing the dialogue with Unite. We reiterate what the Minister said in the House of Parliament yesterday, that there's a fair offer on the table. We're making progress, and we're meeting again with Unite next week. Thank you very much.
I also spoke to a representative from Unite the Union. He said that they were in touching distance of an agreement for the original set of workers that led to this strike action, but he said they were still concerned that bin lorry drivers may face a pay cut. This is what he told me.
Well, today the employer wasn't able to give us the assurances that we need around driver pay. They have said in previous negotiations that those drivers face a pay cut, and today they could not give us assurances, and they have said that they will need to come back to us next week. But the frustrating thing for us is that for the other group of workers affected, the loaders, we are within touching distance of getting to an agreement. We have made big progress there, I think, but the council need to be able to come back to us and give us assurances that our driver members will not be facing a cut in pay. Do not forget, the council leader has said that nobody's pay will be cut. Well, let's see that in these negotiations then.
Now, it's hoped that both sides will meet again early next week, and the union said that they hope that the conciliation service, ACAS, will then get involved later next week. They said they hope to lock the doors and get this situation resolved.
Lisa Dowd in Birmingham reporting there. Now, a blood test that uses AI to detect signs of 12 cancers long before symptoms develop is being tested on NHS patients. Government backing for the technology was announced today at an event to mark the naming of a cancer lab in memory of the campaigner Dame Deborah James, who died of bowel cancer in 2022. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore reports.
A surgical robot is giving Kelly the best chance of beating her bowel cancer. Around 44,000 patients a year in the UK are diagnosed with the disease, and the precision of a robot can improve results.
I think it's fabulous. As a fellow healthcare professional, it's always great to move with the times. Reading up about it, like post-recovery and things like that, said to be less invasive and to aid a quicker recovery after.
But an earlier diagnosis could prevent the need for surgery altogether, and the NHS is now launching a new trial of a blood test that can detect bowel cancer and 11 other forms of the disease with an accuracy of 99%. The test, called MyOnco, can diagnose cancers, including those in the lung, stomach, prostate and ovary. Even before symptoms develop, tumours release fragments of genetic material called microRNA, and these are released into the bloodstream where they can be detected. As little as 10 drops of blood are all that's needed. The microRNA is extracted and analysed with artificial intelligence to not only determine the presence of cancer, but also where it is in the body. Deborah James's bowel cancer was diagnosed at a late stage, and she campaigned up to her death to raise money and give future patients hope. At the newly named Bowel Babe Laboratory, her mum said research could change lives.
Deborah was quite a science geek, really. I think she would be so chuffed to see what her fundraising for the Bowel Babe Fund has gone towards.
And the Health Secretary, a cancer survivor himself, said the government would put medical technology at the heart of its 10-year plan for the NHS.
These are the sorts of breakthroughs that are going to make a real difference to people's chance of survival and may mean that in the future families like Deborah's do not have to cope with the unimaginable grief and loss that they've been through and so many other families go through.
1 in 2 of us will now get some kind of cancer. The NHS is struggling to keep up, and survival rates for many forms of the disease often lag behind those in other countries in Western Europe. But a cheap and accurate blood test for early cancer could help dramatically improve the outlook for patients. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
The Chancellor is in Washington this week, meeting fellow finance ministers and hoping to secure a trade deal with the United States. Rachel Reeves is meeting her US counterpart, Scott Bessent, as she promises to stand up for Britain's national interest. Well, it comes after the IMF/growth forecast for the UK yesterday in the wake of Donald Trump's tariffs. Sky's business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, sat down with the Chancellor.
Well, we're confident that we can secure an agreement with the United States. We're not going to rush a deal. We want to get the right deal in our country's national interest. It's clear that the United States also wants to secure an agreement with the UK, which reflects the huge strengths our economy has, the political and financial stability that Britain is able to offer, as well as being a country that is open to business, investment and to trade. So we'll continue those discussions, but I'm really clear that we will only sign a deal if it is in our national interest to do so. That is the red line for this government. So we've always been really clear that we're not going to be watering down standards in the UK. But there are areas where, on both sides, we can reduce barriers to trade, particularly tariff barriers, to reduce prices for consumers, but also to support jobs and industry in both of our economies. And that's what we're determined to do as a government.
Sky News has obtained a recording of the Shadow Justice Secretary saying that he will bring together a coalition to end the fighting between the Conservatives and Reform. Robert Jenrick told a student event last month that he will try to make sure Reform UK and the Tories do not compete at another election and hand a second term to Sir Keir Starmer. The exclusive story was raised in the Commons today, as our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates reports.
It's a sight that strikes fear into the heart of Tory MPs. Nigel Farage riding high. Wooing the voters the Tories used to rely on. This man says he has the answer. Robert Jenrick is the bookies' favourite to take over the leadership if there's a contest. His plan shared behind closed doors to Tory students last month and obtained by Sky News.
You head towards a general election where the nightmare scenario is that Keir Starmer sail bid through the middle as a result of the two parties being disunited down. I don't know about you, but I'm not prepared for that to happen. I want right to be united. And so one way or another, I'm determined to do that and to bring this coalition together.
That vow to students at this event that one way or another he would stop Reform and the Tories competing is not party policy and goes further than anything Kemi Badenoch, who beat him to the leadership last time around, would say. He denies he wants a pact, but opponents don't believe him.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions.
Here, the Prime Minister going on the attack after Sky News revealed that audio.
The mask has slipped just 1 week before the elections because the Shadow Justice Secretary is not here. He's determined to bring this coalition, he calls it, together one way or another. Well, I think we know what that means.
There's a reason that Kemi Badenoch cannot stop Robert Jenrick and, frankly, plenty of others in the Tory party having a conversation about Reform UK, and it's this. Look at our latest poll from YouGov for Sky News. Reform UK back out in front on 25%, and the Tories a whole 5 percentage points behind on 20%. And that means only one person is going back into Downing Street after the next election, and that is Labour's Keir Starmer. And that is a difficult conversation for Kemi Badenoch to have. The leader of Reform UK says no deal.
Just for clarity, yes or no, would you do a deal with Robert Jenrick or the Tories?
I would only do a deal with people who I could trust. I don't trust them.
Any of them? James Cleverly, any other future leader?
No, I don't trust them.
Kemi Badenoch's strategy means she has to show she can fight off the threat of Reform UK. Next week's local elections will be her first big test. Will it leave more in her party calling for a coalition on the right? Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight, thousands of people heading to Rome and the Vatican to pay their respects to Pope Francis. We'll have the latest from there. And a new photo is released to mark Prince Louis's birthday. We'll show you behind the scenes.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment. We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful.
With global threats rising, I also explore defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real. Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans.
The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Pope Francis was moved to St Peter's Basilica this morning, where he will lie in state ahead of his funeral on Saturday. Tens of thousands of people are expected to travel to the Vatican over the next 3 days to pay their respects. The crowds are already so big, the Vatican officials say they may extend the hours in which mourners can file past the Pope. From the Vatican, Lisa Holland has this report.
From early morning, crowds began to gather to see Pope Francis returned to his people. Some had already started queuing in the hope of later passing by his open casket, including Rachel, John and Chris on a pilgrimage from Greater Manchester. They were scheduled to have had an audience with the Pope today.
We've been so close that we just wanted to be fully part of it and just come and pay our respects. It's like one of the family.
We just want to come and say thank you
We feel really privileged to be here on this day in history.
Well, this is all about him. They've all come for Pope Francis. He was such a special, kind and inclusive man.
At 9 a.m, the bustle of St. Peter's Square gave way to the solemnity of mourning. People straining to see as Pope Francis's coffin was carried up the steps of the Basilica. 2 days after the 88-year-old passed away suddenly from a stroke, his body was brought from his apartments at the Vatican to lie in state. In accordance with the wishes of a pope who championed the poor, his coffin rested not on a raised catafalque, but a simple platform. The Pope's body will remain here until his funeral on Saturday, with several 100,000 people expected to pass by to pay their respects. Outside, this woman said she had cycled from Naples to Rome to be here. Bev and Caroline are on holiday from Canada.
I just think it's a very momentous thing, historic. He was well loved, and to see everybody here is just amazing.
Then, as the service came to an end, a man clutching his baby could be seen amongst the crowd who spontaneously started running, all anxious to join the queues to get inside.
Throughout the morning, the crowds have grown. There are lines of people snaking in literally every direction, people coming from every side of St. Peter's Basilica with that one objective, just to get that moment to pay their respects to Pope Francis. How are you?
Oh, yeah, amazing, amazing experience.
Good.
Yeah.
By early afternoon, Rachel, John and Chris, who we first saw this morning in the queue, had become some of the very first members of the public to pass by the coffin of Pope Francis.
It's so calm and peaceful in there.
We all walked up towards the Pope's casket, and he was laid facing us on his back, uncovered, so we could see him very, very clearly. And then we just had a moment, a wonderful moment there, just say our own prayers, maybe less than a minute, but that's all it needed.
The wait to file past the Pope's body grew to 8 hours long, with so many coming to commemorate a pontiff who famously was at his happiest amongst the people. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Vatican City.
A new photo has been released today by the Prince and Princess of Wales to mark the 7th birthday of Prince Louis. The photo, we understand, was taken earlier this month by Josh Schiller from Norfolk. It shows the Prince sitting on a tree trunk and smiling. Behind-the-scenes footage of a playful Prince has also been released to celebrate the day. Louis shown posing for the camera in the sunshine and running up close to the lens during the photo shoot in Norfolk. Still to come here on the programme, we ask, what is it like to be a teenage girl in 2025? We'll be discussing that next. Hello, welcome back. Now, a new report has painted a grim picture of life for teenage girls here in the UK. Girl Guiding UK says that the proportion of girls who feel unsafe because of sexism has more than doubled in the past decade to 47%. The wider stats are damning. Soaring cases of sexual harassment, and a quarter of all girls aged between 14 and 21 experience at least one form of abuse online. And perhaps worst of all, the school inspector Ofsted says the issue is so common in UK schools that many girls simply don't see the point in reporting any of it. We talk a lot about feminism and the progress, slow though it may be, in gender equality, but for this generation of young girls, it seems more like a distant hope than a possible reality. I'm pleased to say I'm joined in the studio tonight by Holly Bullock, who wrote this report for Stylist magazine, alongside Roxy Longworth, founder of Behind Our Screens, and Aisha Youssef, who's an advocate for Girl Guiding UK. Ladies, really good to see you in the studio tonight. Thank you for coming in to talk about this topic. And Holly, this came to my attention. Well, it sharpened the focus, your article in the Stylist magazine, and many women will remember it. You asked the question, is 2025 the scariest time to be a girl? And you asked that question because of the stats, some of which I touched on in that introduction, and you decided to tour the UK to talk to the young girls behind those stats. What did you find?
We found that basically the answer to that question is yes. I mean, girls are experiencing the misogyny that the generations before them have been experiencing for years, you know, the sexual harassment in real life and the casual misogyny that so many women and girls experience on a daily basis. What's changed is the online element of everything that makes the sexism and misogyny that they experience just so all-consuming. Like, what would have been an experience that was only happening in real life is now happening from the minute they wake up and check their social media apps to the minute they go to bed and log off their social media apps. These issues are kind of being brought into their homes and their bedrooms, and therefore feel a lot more kind of secretive and often a lot less discussed than they have been previously. So we wanted to bring those issues to light.
And what you were finding was often what was happening online was fueling what was happening in real life, making it worse. I mean, you wouldn't expect misogyny or sexism to happen in schools to the extent it is, but you found that it was being fueled by what the boys in their classes are actually seeing online and bringing into school.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's a completely vicious circle in the sense that obviously what's happening online is a reflection of a massively misogynistic culture that girls are growing up in. But as you say, this content that both girls are seeing and the boys around them are seeing is being imposed on them. The kind of the messaging that boys and girls are getting online from a lot of this content.
It's becoming normalised.
It's becoming normalised and replicated in schools and kind of repeated back to them by the people around them.
Yeah, a vicious circle, a sort of cycle of abuse, as it were. Aisha, you're an advocate for Girl Guiding UK, and every year Girl Guiding, you know, talks to young girls to find out what the issues are affecting them. And it feels like every year it seems to be getting worse for your peer group. Is this a picture that you recognise, the picture that Holly uncovered when she went to talk to young girls around the country?
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of the experiences that I read on the article were things that I'd experienced myself or that peers or like friends and stuff had experienced as well. It's very difficult to kind of report these types of things, if that makes sense, because it's all online now. A lot of sexism and stuff does happen in real life, but when it's online and when it's on your phone, your personal phone, it's very difficult to kind of be heard and like have people take your experience seriously. So yeah. Do you
hear the phrase "just ignore it, it's only online"? Because I think there is this misconception that online is different to real life, but so many young people, so many adults are now living their lives online. You can't ignore it, you can't dismiss it, because that's where you spend most of your time. Do you feel that it's not being taken seriously because of that? Oh, just ignore it, just turn it off.
No, absolutely. I think a lot of people underestimate the fact that social media is almost compulsory, if that makes sense. If you're not in the loop, then you're missing out. So it's very difficult to kind of balance the positives of social media, having those kind of like private spaces where you can interact with your friends and share like a funny meme and that type of thing, but also having to kind of face like the online abuse or like the sexual harassment, that type of thing. Those elements of it, everything just is, there's just so many aspects to social media that you have to consider, but you don't really have a choice in the matter.
If I can, Roxy, can I talk to you about Behind Our Screens, which is a movement you've started based on an experience you had as a 13-year-old girl. Can you just tell us a bit about what happened to you? Because it's a story that, sadly, is all too familiar in this day and age, but at the time you didn't know that.
No. Sorry, no, not at all. So when I was 13, it was very subtle, so it's hard to kind of say in words, because now it's like frustrating, but it felt so subtle. I was coerced and pressured into sending photos to a 17-year-old guy at my school. He then shared those with his friend who used them to blackmail me into sending more and more images with the threat that otherwise he'd send them around the school. And eventually they were sent around the whole school. Everybody had them. And I was punished for that, and the bullying and the shame.
You were punished by your school for that, weren't you? They said, you're lucky we haven't reported you to the police for sending nude pictures.
Yeah, and at the time, that felt fair. I thought it was fully my fault, so that made sense to me, and so I started punishing myself by self-harming, and was eventually hospitalised and spent the rest of that year 10 for me, on suicide watch.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. But as I said, I'm sure you can back this up, Holly, with what you've discovered going around the UK. Sending nude pictures or sharing pornographic material amongst young people, it's pretty commonplace now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the conversations I was having with girls, I mean, majority aged between 10 and 17, issues of like girls sharing explicit photos of themselves were common, but also issues of girls having explicit photos of themselves taken without their consent that were being shared. The issue is massive.
Yeah, there's a young girl who said she was coming out of a classroom and a boy filmed up her skirt. She didn't know what had happened until it had already gone all around the school.
That was one story I heard. There were many others that were similar, some less severe and less criminal, but similarly kind of like issues of sexual harassment and instances of sexual harassment happening in school. It's widespread.
Talk to us about Behind Our Screens, Roxy. What is it you wanted to do with that? Because when you were 13, you felt like you were the only person going through this. You had a mum who was aware, so said to you, don't send any of those kind of pictures to boys. You had a talk at school about online safety, and that was incorporated into that. But you still fell into that trap because it's not as easy as the school or your mum made it sound, to just not do it.
Yeah. I think you've touched on basically the two main reasons I've started Behind Our Screens. The first one is because looking back, it's so depressing that I wasted so many years feeling like I was the only person in the world who'd messed up like this, and I felt so disgusting. And so I wanted to create a space where people could talk more openly and honestly about what they were experiencing online and use their experiences to help the next person coming up behind not feel so alone. So that was the first aspect. And the second one is, yes, I felt like there was a huge this huge gap between my mum's, like my parents' generation, and my teachers. I didn't feel like they really understood the world that we were growing up in. And it meant that the stuff that we were taught in PSHE lessons or the messaging from adults wasn't something that I felt like I could relate to, and therefore it wasn't that helpful. And so I wanted to create this platform that would kind of bridge that gap by making sure that young people's real lived experiences are informing these conversations.
And Aisha, it's not just about misogyny, sexism and abuse. Young girls being influenced online, it's about judgment and comparison as well. There's a lot going on there for young girls, you know, as if the misogyny wasn't enough. There's so much more happening. What's your experience and the peers' experience of the day-to-day life of being a teen girl? There's so many pressures from all angles, it seems.
Yeah, it's very difficult because with social media, the way that algorithms kind of work is that once you've liked one piece of content a lot of other stuff related to it starts to flood in, if that makes sense. So I could like something about healthy eating, and next thing you know, there's loads of stuff relating to like just like body image or like just like promotion of like limiting your eating and that type of thing, which is very dangerous.
And when you're being fed that on a daily basis because you're on your phone on a daily basis.
Yeah. So this kind of harmful content, I think that some people don't realise that just because you've clicked on something that relates to it, that type of thing, it doesn't like eliminate the fact that it's still harmful. And that's why I think it's so important for social media companies to kind of listen to young women and girls about what type of content they think is harmful to make sure that they don't have to kind of experience it.
Yeah, Roxy, you've called social media a shame machine. And so much of the perceived solution to this problem is don't send the nudes, don't wear a short skirt, put makeup on before you leave the house because that's how girls should look, because we all see those girls online. It's not put that way to boys, though, is it?
No, so there was definitely the issue with us being told not to send photos and there being no conversation around boys not asking for photos. But I do think that the shame element is the thing that's like both boys and girls struggle with, that it keeps everyone silent, it keeps young people, like, it makes them unable to ask the tricky questions about things that make them feel uncomfortable or like, or something that they want that they know they shouldn't. Like, it keeps everyone quiet in a way that is not helpful and is not going to help us find solutions.
Holly, safe to say it's a really difficult time to be a young girl in 2025, but from the girls that you spoke to, they're not passive in this. Many of them are angry and want to change it. What needs to be done in terms of, you know, my generation? We talk a lot here on Sky News about feminism, about strong girls, about the next generation handing it down and paving the way for equality. Doesn't feel like they're getting any of the benefits of that. So what can be done? What needs to be done? What do these young girls want?
I think, honestly, the first step is listening to them and really being careful about how we have those conversations. I think lots of adult women and adults in general think that, you know, feminism's happened, young girls are, everything's improving, but actually what we're seeing is the statistics are saying that we're going backwards. Things aren't improving for girls.
Yeah, don't tell us, talk to us.
Exactly. So having those conversations, especially for parents, it's about like having very open, honest, non-judgmental conversations that try and eliminate some of that shame involved. I think, as you mentioned, like the girls I spoke to were all really aware that what they were seeing was harmful, but just felt unable to either deal with it or talk about it. So I think helping to open those conversations is a really good start.
Well, Holly Bullock, author Aisha Youssef from Girl Guiding UK, and Roxy Longworth, founder of Behind Our Screens, thank you for coming in to talk about your experiences and your findings about what it is like to be a teenage girl in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, if you've been affected by any of the issues we've just been talking about, you can contact the Samaritans. 116123 is the number you can call anytime, or email joe@samaritans.org. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. We are going to be talking to the creator of a Welsh indie horror film that has been taking the streaming platforms by storm. And we'll be talking about Marcus Rashford's future. Could he make his loan spell at Aston Villa permanent? All the details on the way.
The Yazidis are a very small religious group, and in 2014, ISIS seemed to have set about their destruction.
Chilling reports describe ISIL militants rounding up families, conducting mass executions, and enslaving Yazidi women.
Some Yazidi survivors refused to be beaten by ISIS. But the suffering of the Yazidis is far from over. 10 years of darkness on Sky News.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology?
The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power.
It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse.
Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, we'll have the all-Welsh horror film that's being rolled out on global streaming services. We'll speak to the creator. But first, David is here with the sport. And we're going to talk about Marcus Rashford. I still can't get used to him in a Villa kit. Where is he?
He's coming, I believe.
There he is. But you might get used to him being in it permanently because he's been saying some things that suggest that he might not go back to Manchester United under the current management structure.
Yeah, you have to say, Marcus Rashford, who went on loan from Manchester United to Aston Villa in the winter transfer window, it's gone well for him at Villa. 4 goals, 5 assists across all competitions, which is a good return in 3 or 4 months. And the thing is, with Villa, they have a £40 million option to make the deal permanent. 3 things you have to consider, though, when it comes to Villa's interest in potentially signing him permanently. Will Villa get in the Champions League next season? They're currently 7th. Beaten by Manchester City last night. Only the top 5 get into the Champions League next season. So they're outside of that at the moment. Second thing to consider, can Aston Villa afford him? It's a £40 million option. But reportedly at Manchester United, Rashford is on around £300,000 a week. Extend that over a 4 or 5 year contract, you're talking about £70 million of investment. Yeah. Can Villa afford that? Third thing to consider then is, does Marcus Rashford want to sign for Aston Villa? And there's no guarantee of that. Other clubs are looking at him, including Barcelona out in Spain. I think there is an acceptance now that he won't play for Manchester United again. There were some quite scathing comments from the United head coach, Ruben Amorim, earlier in the season. Said he'd rather put his goalkeeper coach on the bench than Marcus Rashford.
Ouch.
And his goalkeeper coach is 63. So that just shows the kind of attitude that is going ongoing at Manchester United when it comes to Rashford. So if he is to play for United again, you'd think the head coach would have to not be there. You'd also think some of the senior executives at United would have to not be there. But there should be lots of interest in him in the summer, given how well he's done so far for Villa.
Well, meanwhile, Manchester United seem to be making plans without him. They're looking at another forward that could affect Rashford's future as well. Who's that?
This is Matheus Cunha at Wolves. He has a £64 million release clause. Again, United aren't the only team in for him. Could be as many as 4 or 5 in the Premier League looking at him. For United to do that, though, they might well need to sell Rashford, sell players like Jadon Sancho, sell players like Antony. So they're going to have to do outgoings before they can get anyone in. But Cunha is certainly one that they're looking at come the summer. Big game in the Premier League, though, tonight, and it concerns who might win the title.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I'm sorry, I just have a German passport. Hopefully I can convince them and show them and prove them that I'm proud to be the English manager.
For only the 3rd time in history, the FA have turned to a foreign manager to take charge of the men's England team. Thomas Tuchel follows in the footsteps of Sven-Göran Eriksson.
If we don't do results, of course, they will try to hang me, but even if I was an Englishman, they hang me. So that's...
And Fabio Capello.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
OK, time to maybe hide behind the sofa for the next few minutes, because we're going to talk about a horror film, an all-Welsh indie horror film that's been released across some of the world's biggest streaming services. The Mill Killers is made and set in Wales, with an all-Welsh cast and a Welsh director. Let's take a look.
Ever since we did it, I've been suffering from this condition. It means I think that everybody is looking at me, convinced that everybody knows about us, about this.
Is it safe to come out yet? Well, I'm glad to say the director, writer and producer, who isn't at all scary, I hope, of this film, Aled Owen, joins me now from Carmarthen. Hello, Aled.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you. You certainly got pulses racing here on Sky News. Talk to me about the Mill Killers. What's it all about?
So it follows a young woman called Rhiannon who suffers from scopophobia, the fear of being watched or stared at. And this came about as a result of some guilt from when she was a teenager. Her three friends peer pressured her into going into their local steel mill where all of their family members work and stealing a cash box of monthly cash earnings, inadvertently causing the bankruptcy of the town and of the mill itself. So the film picks up 10 years later. The girls all come back to the town of Milton in Wales, and they peer pressure her yet again to going into the mill, the now abandoned mill, to retrieve the stolen money. But obviously there's a few twists and turns waiting for them inside. Yeah, don't give those away, whatever you do, Aled. You've gathered awards, recognition from some of the biggest streaming platforms. It's going well for an independent film, but this all started during COVID, didn't it? You were inspired by the eerie scenes in and around Wales during lockdown. And of course, your circumstances, as many people during lockdown, you found yourself back to square one in your film career and having to set up and do things on your own. So it was sort of a right place, right time almost for this. Yeah, well, it's nice to have a silver lining come out of such a bleak time, really. So it was, I was just on my one of my allowed hours of outdoor time, walking through my hometown of Carmarthen and noticing a town that I grew up in that was so full of life and so active, being literally a ghost town in those moments. And it just inspired me to come up with a different non-COVID related story about why a town might look like that after a certain shift. So yeah, it came about because of the streets of Carmarthen in lockdown, and then in 2022 we started filming and in those very same streets with some of the locals that Carmarthen people might recognise as extras or background artists. I love that. This is literally Welsh through and through, like you said, from the location to the people working on it to the people in it. What's been the local reaction? It's been brilliant. So we had our world premiere. We were really lucky to get into Fright Fest in London. So for such a small, handmade film, to have a premiere in the Odeon Lux in Leicester Square was insane. And then 2 weeks later, we had sort of a homecoming, and we had our screening, our Welsh premiere in the Lyric Theatre in Carmarthen. And that felt like a real full circle moment, because that's where I fell in love with acting and grew up doing theatre performances. So a lot of those people were in it. A lot of the people who weren't able to be in it definitely knew about it. A lot of them contributed to our crowdfunding campaign, which made the film possible. So it really is a homegrown project, and I think the people of Carmarthen especially really feel a sense of ownership over it, especially now that it's something to be proud of, that it's out there on Apple TV and Amazon Prime of all places. Yeah, I was going to say homegrown, but it's gone global. I was going to ask you where to watch it. So Apple TV, what was the other one? Yeah, Apple TV, Amazon Prime. I think you can get it on Google, YouTube Movies. There's lots of places that have it. And it's available not just here in the UK, but also in the US, Australia, New Zealand. It's really, I can't wrap my head around it. Yeah, literally putting Carmarthen on the global map. I'm sure that little blue button on Sky Remotes, if you say The Mill Killers, you'll be able to find it on a platform on Sky.
Aled, really good to speak to you. Aled Owen there, director, writer and producer of The Mill Killers. Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. Not that he needs it, it seems. Time for a look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The UK looking mainly dry for the next few days. It's going to turn warmer next week, but Ireland and the north and the west can expect some rain at times. Before then, mostly dry this evening, with any lingering showers soon fading away. But many North Sea coastal counties are going to be cloudy and locally damp. It will stay mainly dry tonight, but southern and eastern Britain will cloud over with some drizzle possible. Cork and Kerry can expect patchy rain later. It's going to turn chilly in the clearer north and west, with a few fog patches likely. The UK and east of Ireland looking dry for tomorrow morning, bar the odd light shower, with early cloud over southern and eastern Britain breaking inland to give good sunny spells to most of us.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
That's all from the UK tonight. We are back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Up next, it's The World with Yalda Hakim and Anna Botting at the Vatican. We'll see you tomorrow night.